colonization, two world wars, civilian wars. In China's neighborhood, be it Vietnam and Thailand, they were volatile by their definition. In 2013, Xi Jinping announced this new concept, One Belt and One Road. And Robert D. Kaplan, one of my favorite speakers and journalists and research, he had this wonderful concept. It says, geography revenge. You can change anything with technology. You can invent. You can think of any social innovation or innovation in any definition, but geography never changes. So Chinese leadership, after its revolution back in 1970s and 80s, when Deng Xiaoping came to power, it revived its economy. Today's Chinese leadership wants to go back to geography and create this gigantic economic power once again. 21st century has never seen this type of economic gigantic project, which includes 30 countries involved, 32 countries partnering, connecting the entire Asia together. And today we have wonderful speakers coming from different backgrounds, and they do have their story that we would like to discuss. One of the first speakers today is Antonio Graceffo. Well, the first idea that came to my mind, Antonio spent his entire life studying and studying. He has PhD, MBA, he wrote 7 books. Now you are having the second PhD, and it's all about Asia Pacific and China. And I think this is going to be my great pleasure to welcome Antonio on the stage, where he will be sharing his story. If you do have questions, please keep it for the panel discussion. And I personally have too many questions to Antonio. Please, warm applause for Antonio.
Hello. Okay, great. So today I'm going to be talking about ASEAN. So as you can imagine, with a name like Antonio Graceffo, I am from Southeast Asia. Not really. But I've lived in Southeast Asia for about, I've been in Asia for 17 years. The last 5 years I've been in China. Before that I was in Southeast Asia. So I'm generally the de facto sort of expert on Southeast Asia. A lot of the discussion about One Belt, One Road, one of the things I see a lot of journalists and economists writing about is, will the project succeed? Will it be successful? Will they be able to achieve all the goals that they're trying to achieve? One of the main points of my research is it absolutely doesn't matter if it's successful or not successful. In fact, I don't even know how you would measure success. They started it. It's happening. That's enough. Okay, it's going to get better and better, whatever that is. It may not look exactly at the end the way that it was originally intended, but it's going to happen. Let's see if I can figure out how to use this machine. There we go. All right, so the benefits for ASEAN in OBOR, and I still call it OBOR. I know it's now called One Belt, One Road. But benefits include, obviously, infrastructure and economic development, soft power, human capital, education, spread of the Chinese language, resurgence of Chinese identity along the Silk Road, and massive debt. Oops. All right, so when Donald Trump decided to pull out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP, a few months ago, a lot of people have been talking about globalization and then talking about how America is retracting from the world and disengaging with Asia, this and that. And this winds up getting lumped into discussions about OBOR, about the One Belt, One Road. So my point is this, that the U.S. did pull out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. This does not change the U.S. engagement with Southeast Asia because there was no TPP. It didn't exist yet. The engagement was already there. The engagement continues. And it has no influence at all on OBOR. And now, in the last few weeks, the question has been, why have the Americans not joined One Belt, One Road? Why did Donald Trump not send a representative? In the end, actually, they did send a delegation from Washington. But again, I just want to stress that China is already heavily involved in ASEAN, irrespective of OBOR, One Belt, One Road. Also, irrespective of TPP, irrespective of America or any other arrangements. China is already one of the largest trading partners of ASEAN as a bloc. It's also the leading, it's in the top 5 trading partners of each country of ASEAN if taken individually. China is also one of the largest FDI partners in ASEAN. One point, though, in all my research on One Belt, One Road all the way through Southeast Asia and on, is that China tends to run a trade surplus with all these countries. So China is one of the largest trading partners of Southeast Asia and each of the countries individually, but they run a trade surplus. So they're selling more things to Southeast Asia than what they're buying from Southeast Asia. China tends to be one of the largest investors in these countries, but not the largest one. So there has been some criticism that said, you're going to a poor country, you're selling them a bunch of stuff, you're making money, why don't you reinvest it? Well, OBOR certainly represents a lot of infrastructure investment throughout ASEAN, but not necessarily the largest investment partner. China is not a member of ASEAN, but they are a member of ASEAN Plus 3, which includes Japan and Korea, and then ASEAN Plus 6, which also includes India, Australia, and New Zealand. China has, in addition to, one of the reasons why I say One Belt, One Road, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but I just want to say it's not the most important engagement. China has so many other engagements with ASEAN already, and when we call it One Belt, One Road, we're really taking a lot of things that already exist and sort of grouping them together. So I've heard a lot of economists say things like you're connecting dots. You know, these projects already exist, these relationships already exist, and now you're just connecting them and giving it a name. So if you look, there's all these other organizations that China has involved ASEAN, and my favorite ones, because they all have these acronyms, NDB, FTAAP, IIB, they all have these acronyms, but my absolute favorite one, this is my favorite one, ASEAN People's Republic of China Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Arrangement. And they didn't even bother to make an acronym for that. Because the acronym would already be like a sentence. And it's already an acronym plus a name. But anyway, the point is, there's a ton of these organizations, a ton of these engagements. Now, a lot of people maybe are not as familiar with ASEAN, but ASEAN is the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. It encompasses 10 countries. What's interesting about ASEAN, who's from the EU? Anybody EU citizens here? Okay, many EU citizens. Often you'll see ASEAN compared to the EU, but it's actually sort of a false comparison because the EU is what we call a supranational organization, which means the EU has its own courts, you have your own laws, you have your parliament, you have all these. ASEAN doesn't have that. ASEAN has a series of agreements. It's not a unified bloc, even on the scale that the EU is unified. Of course, they don't have a common currency. The common language spoken in ASEAN meetings is English, which is also interesting because none of the ASEAN countries have English as their official language. They don't have ASEAN on their passports just yet. I think that will be coming though at some point. So it's not similar to EU. It's probably somewhere between NAFTA and EU. The population is just over 600 million. However, the countries are all of very different sizes and economies. So Indonesia by itself represents more than 1/3 of the population of ASEAN. 240 some odd million people in Indonesia. The smallest countries in ASEAN, you're looking at Brunei, which has 400,000. You've got East Timor, which has tens of thousands. So these countries are, some of them are very small. In terms of economic development, they also vary dramatically. So Indonesia is very large in terms of population. Indonesia, in a way, reminds me of China because the promedia, oh my God, I'm not thinking in English right now. The median income in Indonesia, the average income, is $3,600 a year. But the population is huge. So then the GDP becomes very large, and it's a bit misleading because you think it's a rich country maybe. It's on the way, it's developing, but it's not rich. It's just that the population is so huge. Other countries such as Singapore has an average income that's on par with Canada and just slightly below the United States. Brunei is on par with Western Europe. Right, so we got very different levels of development, and then three of the smaller, poorer countries or less developed countries would be let's say Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam. Vietnam has an average income of around $2,000 a year. Laos, Cambodia, and Myanmar or Burma, the average income drops to like $1,200, $1,300 a year. So you're talking about vastly different economies, vastly different sizes of countries, different stages of development. Malaysia has an average income which is actually higher than China. They're all in different stages of development, so their engagement with China varies dramatically, and their dependence on China varies dramatically. Did I go the wrong way? There we go. All right, so Singapore. Singapore is a really interesting example. So China generally runs trade surpluses with its partners in ASEAN, with most of them. In the case of Singapore, what's very interesting is Singapore is the largest source of foreign direct investment in China. And Singapore is the largest recipient of Chinese foreign direct investment in ASEAN. Now, for people who are not economists, you may think it's strange that a country that is the source of investment is also the recipient of investment, but actually we find these things to be true. Because if a country is investing outward, it means they're rich, they're developing, other people want to invest in that country. So a good example would be China and the US are both very large sources of investment as well as recipients of investment, two of the largest in the world. So that's the relationship with Singapore. So their economies are very closely related. And this is an example of soft power. So Singapore's port, the Port of Singapore, in the past, there was a time when the Port of Singapore accounted for 30% of their GDP. Looking around the room, I'm probably in the upper third in terms of age. Okay, if you're under 30 years old, you probably can't imagine there was ever a time that Singapore manufactured cheap plastic products that broke before you got them home. You don't picture that today. You think of Singapore as a rich country. Singapore has moved away from manufacturing, moved away from trade, and they make their money in banking and technology and things like this. As we call this moving up the value chain. So the Port of Singapore has become less and less important, but it still accounts for 7% of their GDP. So last year there was a dispute about the South China Sea. Singapore made a public statement about the ruling against China, and then it was quickly decided that OBOR would no longer link with the Port of Singapore. It would go to Malaysia instead and link with a railway and a port in Malaysia. Now, also typical of what's happening with the One Belt, One Road is that I read that, and then a month later, there was almost nothing about that. And there were all these economists coming forward saying, well, if you skip Singapore and you build the road and you end in Malaysia, the ships are going to have to go an extra 400 nautical miles, and it's going to cost all this money. But I think what's very interesting is the impact that OBOR has on journalists who write about OBOR and then on people that might be investing based on what they're reading. So I think there's a lot of speculation. I mean, this project has only officially been in progress for 3 or 4 years. A lot of what you read is prediction rather than actual fact. All right, Vietnam. Vietnam is another very good example of what OBOR looks like throughout most of ASEAN. So with Vietnam, China is one of Vietnam's largest trading partners. China is also one of Vietnam's largest FDI partners, but not the largest. And Vietnam runs a trade deficit with China. So again, we have this arrangement that the poorer country runs a trade deficit. China invests heavily in Vietnam, but is not one of the largest investors. Among the projects that they're investing, and now we call them all OBOR, we call them One Belt, One Road. These projects started long ago, and they're sort of being, let's say, stepped up because of One Belt, One Road, but they include things like thermonuclear plants, water pipelines, metallurgy, and railroads, which is typically what OBOR looks like all the way along. It includes all different kinds of things, telecommunications and whatnot. Cambodia is another very interesting case for OBOR. They actually held a forum in Cambodia last year, and it was called Cambodia, the Kingdom of Opportunity along the One Belt, One Road. And the reason why I like that name is because it really describes a lot of what OBOR is about. When we start calculating what is the value of OBOR, the economic value, the GDP, how much is it worth, it's very tempting and very easy to say, you know what we'll do? We'll take the value of the thermonuclear plant, we'll add that to the railway, we'll add that to the port, and that's how we calculate the GDP. It's not exactly right. Those are the big projects. Those are the big projects which are generally being done by state-owned enterprises and maybe state funding. However, as the belt develops, as the project develops, there's more and more private entrepreneurship going on. Large and small, also state-owned companies, also private companies. So along the route, you're going to find, for example, specific provinces like Shanghai province invest heavily in Cambodia. Another province, I believe Yunnan, invests heavily in Laos. So you're going to find individual provinces making investments, you're going to find individual companies, and even people. So you go to Cambodia today, and there's like, you know, a Chinese couple from Jiangsu, and they're cutting hair. Okay, and I don't think anybody calculated that in when they said the value, you know, the GDP is this and that. All right, but that's what you're getting. You're getting along the road. And when I say along the road, it doesn't necessarily mean in sight of the road. So yes, when you build a railroad, somebody builds a restaurant, a hotel next to the railroad. But also we're finding China builds a railroad, and then some entrepreneur from China goes there and says, hey, there's an old French factory 50 miles from this railroad, which was not profitable before, but now that we're only 50 miles from the new railroad, maybe we should reopen this factory. So we're getting a lot of this kind of investment. It's, I don't want to use the word opportunistic because that sounds negative, but I mean in a positive way that people are finding opportunities, and these are often just private individuals or the governments of the provinces or state-owned or even village-owned enterprises. One of the other benefits, because you know, I'm a professor, and so I'm as much a social scientist as I am an economist, I like looking at how OBOR affects the people. So a very interesting point is that Phnom Penh, the capital of Cambodia, has historically been a Chinese city, always, even at the time of the French. Even in the mid-19th century, Phnom Penh population was generally Chinese. And the Chinese dominated the business sector in Cambodia. In 2004, when I was teaching in Cambodia, it was illegal to celebrate Chinese New Year. The police were actually going around and hitting people with sticks and, you know, kicking over their things and stealing their offerings and whatever to prevent people from celebrating Chinese New Year. Last year, a Cambodian government newspaper said they estimated that 30% of the population of Cambodia, not just Phnom Penh, but the whole country, celebrated Chinese New Year. And it's now just been incorporated into their culture, if you will, the same way Christmas, you know, is celebrated in a lot of countries that are not, you know, Christian. So I find that very interesting. So these shops, these Chinese shops, always existed in Cambodia. So if you are from China and you're an entrepreneur, you go to Cambodia, you're going to go to these people and do business with them because you have cultural connection, language connection, and also because they're the people who control the business sector. As a result of OBOR and Chinese investment, One Belt, One Road, now China's become very important for Cambodia, which has given rise to an increase in Chinese identity among the Sino-Khmers. Another very interesting point is that in Vietnam, there's a significant Chinese community in Vietnam, Sino-Vietnamese. So what happens is the Cambodians send mostly forest products over the border. You know that, I don't know if you know this, the Ho Chi Minh Trail, you know, from the Vietnam War, that runs right through Cambodia. So you have Chinese entrepreneurs that take goods right to the border of Vietnam. They trade the goods to Chinese people in Vietnam, who then transport the goods across Vietnam up to Yunnan. And then they trade directly with China. So some economists refer to this as the bamboo telegraph. Right? So this is just a network of Chinese. And I know for a fact that Chinese in Cambodia are trading with Chinese in Laos. And then, of course, Malaysia has always had a Chinese-dominated business sector, and these guys are reaching out in all directions, mostly to China directly, but also to ASEAN, the other ASEAN neighbors. We're at my conclusion. Look at that. All right, so this is my conclusion. Irrespective of the TPP, irrespective of what Trump does, Trump doesn't do, irrespective of One Belt, One Road, irrespective of success or failure, I don't know how you could even deem any part of One Belt, One Road a failure, but regardless of how One Belt, One Road goes, China is already heavily engaged in economic activity with Cambodia, with ASEAN. They're already one of the major trading partners, one of the major infrastructure partners. Every piece of infrastructure that they build just winds up generating other income opportunities, other business opportunities. And this will continue to increase, regardless of what happens with One Belt, One Road, TPP, or anything like that. Countries like Cambodia and Laos and Burma are very dependent on China because they're very small. Cambodia, especially, is trapped between two huge neighbors. You've got Vietnam on one side, Thailand on the other, Vietnam is one of the largest standing armies in the world. Both countries have stolen land from Cambodia over the years. I mean, as recently as 50 years ago. And now China, this concept of the brother, the older brother looking out for you, to show Cambodia is very dependent on China. They're 100% within the Chinese political and economic sphere, and they basically needed it, and they had it. Other countries like Laos, same thing. When I went to Laos doing research in 2007, the Vietnamese army building in Vientiane was double the size of the Lao government building. So Laos was an effective colony of Vietnam. Now, because of Chinese investment, Vietnam has a bit less to say in China, and of course this will continue because China will keep putting more money into Laos. Other countries like Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand, they are less dependent on China, but will still benefit from trading with China and from investment with China. Thailand in particular has actually put the brakes on a few of the OBOR projects. Been a few projects where they said, no, we don't want that railroad, or we don't want that part of the railroad. We still love you, we still want to trade with you, but we're just not going to do that one project. But even with them, I believe that their engagement with China will continue, whether or not they come into the Chinese economic sphere or into the Chinese political sphere remains to be seen. And that goes for Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand. I planned this, that's just a review. Okay, this is me. I publish China economic research every morning, Monday through Friday, on my LinkedIn. So if you're interested, you can sign up on my LinkedIn, and you can 找我的微信 and add me on WeChat. Thank you very much.
Thank you.